Welcome to my happy place.
Hey, great. No, I'm loving your happy place.
Cool, isn't it?
It's very cool.
I've had some great
Happy place
conversations.
envy.
Yeah, I was lucky to stumble upon this place. There's not many of these around. Not near me, anyway. I thought in London it would have been.
There is a place I looked at. It's about sort of 350 quid a day, which ain't bad.
A day. Can you do it by the hour, though?
If you can do it by the hour.
Yeah. Day podcast might be pushing it.
Yeah, but I guess if you got the people to come in on rotation, but it'd be a long day.
Sure. It would. Yeah, I guess that's the point. You could churn out 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I think I've got 2 in me a day at most.
Yeah.
I'll get tired after the podcast. Conversations get deep.
Yeah.
And that's, do you know what? I'm so excited to talk to you. So excited to
Great.
talk to you because the topic of men's groups, men's communities, what is a man, all of these topics are just genuinely like passionate, curious, hungry to learn more about. So yeah, thanks for coming up.
Yeah, a pleasure.
From London.
Yeah, no, real pleasure.
Should we start with like why do you think, or why do we need more men's groups now, possibly more than ever?
I think it's a two-pronged answer to that, really. I think why we need them now more than ever is, let me rephrase that. I'm not sure we do need them now more than ever. I think we've always needed them, and there was just a period where we didn't have them. And it's this kind of, and why I say it like that is I think there's a sort of idea that men's groups and men getting together in that way is kind of a new thing. And actually, I think it's probably what we've always done. If we went back to, even during sort of agricultural revolution and periods like that, there's evidence that it was quite common for men to get together, whether they'd be working together and conversing while they were working together. But small groups of men working together was often the way. Even if you was a tradesman, you'd have probably had a small group of men who you worked with, which would have meant you built a sense of community, and there would have been time for communication within that. And one of I call them the great wounds. One of the great wounds, I think, for men was the Industrial Revolution, because come the Industrial Revolution, suddenly our work is atomized. We do one part of the job, and we don't see it through to the end. And that robs us of what I call the 4 C's, which is what I believe men need to thrive, which is connection, challenge, contribution, and celebration. And so suddenly, come the Industrial Revolution, the men go off to a place to work. No member a part of their community. They do a single piece of the work, which never really ends. And that's how they live their lives. And I think that broke down the need for us to be in smaller groups, whether initially it probably would have been hunting, to building, to whatever it was. And that's where we lost the sense of connection with each other. And so I always say men's groups are like the greatest tool that we once had and forgot. So I think why we're doing it again is because we're feeling the effect of the isolation that the Industrial Revolution, capitalism, late capitalism, the separation that's created. I think men are sensing that now, and sensing that there must be a different way we can be together, which is more beneficial to us.
Yeah, definitely. No, in my own experience, I've craved that you've just described, that without even knowing it, like, when you feel a bit lost and you're like, I could really do with some connection, guidance, strength around me, good men who maybe have answers that I don't have due to my experience, my age. So I guess that actively means now we have to go out and look for that community, right? Rather than build it. We have to build it or possibly find it.
Yeah.
Why is it? Even though, like, you don't have to sell to me about the community and how good mentors and good men can affect your life. But even when I was looking at the Mankind Project, it almost feels like it's a secret.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether this is just through the eyes that I'm viewing it through. But yeah, I feel like I'm not doing something wrong, but like not many people know about this and not many people should.
Yeah.
It's got that really strange, bizarre feeling to the idea of a men's group. I don't know why, or whether you've experienced people that have similar things to this.
I mean, I think that's very common.
Right.
And I think there's a few reasons for that. I mean, in general, this month actually, I've been involved in men's personal development specifically, and men's groups for 20 years, and it was a very different world 20 years ago in the world of men's groups. You know, it was much more so than now secret. You know, it felt like something from Fight Club. It was like men getting together.
That's exactly how it is.
Yeah,
Something
it's
like Fight
men
Club.
getting together above an office somewhere or in the basement of some guy's shop. And rather than sort of beating each other up, we'd be sort of building each other up, you know. But the conversations were very different. If I'd speak to people then, if I'd speak to men and say, yeah, I'm in men's groups, you know, it would either be, oh, that's interesting, and there'd be a little bit of, I quite fancy that, but I don't really know how to, you know, what do we have to do? Do we get naked? Do we put stags' heads on? You know, it's all that sort of stuff. But intrigued.
Yeah.
Or just, why would I want to do that? Like, what? That's the last thing I want to do, is get together with a bunch of men and talk about how I'm doing. And if it was talking to women about it, there would often be a sense of like, why does it have to be on your own? Why do men have to get together on your own? And I think that's a part of where the feeling of secrecy comes from, is historically the results for people haven't always been good when a group of men get together in private and have conversations. It's usually quite the contrary. It's quite usually what comes out is quite damaging.
Yeah, even when you say historically, even now, like the idea of men getting together. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
No problem. Have a good day.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not just historically though, is it now? It's you know, because we see. I mean, where do we visibly see men get together now? It's like, I can think politics, sports teams,
football.
Yeah.
After work.
Dan the Boozer.
Yeah. You know, so there is a reason for that, why that feeling of secrecy comes from. With the Mankind Project particularly, I think the reason that it's still, when you look it up, it feels a little bit like there's an air of secrecy around it, is I think because at the core of what we do is the New Warrior training adventure. That's the sort of, has always been the core piece of the Mankind Project, and traditionally that was our way into our men's groups. Was you went off to that weekend, and then you joined the men's groups. The reason that I still think we don't use the word secret, we say sacred. What happens on this weekend is sacred, because men are putting their intention into it for themselves and for each other. And like a movie, it gets spoiled if you know what's going to happen. But also, part of how it works is it's a leap of faith. That's almost the start. Like, I'm going to go and meet a bunch of men that I don't know, and I'm going to trust on some level they have my best intentions at heart. So we try and do keep a sort of, we have to keep an air around it, because there is that element to it. So when people come up against it, sometimes I say, it looks a bit like culty from the outside, or it looks a bit secretive what you're doing. It's only because we don't want to show you the end of the movie, you know. But that, and also creating the mystique, I think, gives something to what it is.
It does, because I was on the website, so I went to sign up the other day, and it's actually sold out in Exeter, I believe.
Yeah.
So I emailed about the next available one, but I was trying to dig for more information on the website, and I couldn't get what I wanted. And at first I was frustrated, and then part of me thought, no, actually, this is making me more interested. Like, you know, the main aspects were there of what I was looking for,
yeah.
But I couldn't find. I wanted that itinerary. This is safe. This is what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is as well, you'll highlight usually one thing that you think, oh, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it is that leap of faith. It is that, right, do you know what? Fuck it. I'm going in. I'm gonna give myself up for the weekend, and I'm gonna learn more about what this is about. So who traditionally reaches out to you then and joins men's groups? Is it people that understand the benefits and want to be part of it, or is it often men that are just so lost that they don't know where else to go? Both.
You know, because we're
Just come to this microphone a tiny bit more. Sorry,
sure.
mate. Yeah.
We're the longest running men's-specific personal development program in the world now.
Wow.
And because of that, there's quite a lot of MKP men around. And so often it's a man meeting another man and says, I want a little bit of what you have. You seem to have something different that I want. Or there seems to have been a change in you that I've seen, which I want a bit of that. So we often get, it's still word of mouth is our biggest kind of pull, for want of a better word. So we have a lot of men who already have half an idea of what they're looking for coming on. And then we get men who are just like, I don't know what I need, but I need something. And they kind of either look it up or Google it and go, that thing, that's what I want. Let me at least go and see what they have. So desperation and inspiration, really. That's what brings people to the NWTA. At least we have men's groups online now, which are free and any man can turn up to anytime we run those 4 times a week. So we're having more men coming through men's groups than cold. So that's changed how people get involved a little bit and why.
So desperation and inspiration, I like that. Does that usually attract the guys in their late 30s, 40s, 50s? Because for me, desperation, like, yeah, you get a bit fucked up in your 20s, but desperation for me comes when I think I should probably know better and know more than I do when I'm 38. And the desperation can come from, look, yeah, I'm 38 and I still am missing something.
Yeah. I mean, my personal theory on this, and I'm actually writing a book on it at the moment, is we know the hero's journey from mythology quite well through Joseph Campbell and all those guys. I actually think there's a second hero's journey that we go on. And so I believe that the first journey in our lives is one of just trying to answer a very simple question. A question will get posed to us very early on in our lives, and that's when our quest starts. And if it's a bad situation, it's like, how do I survive this? If it's a good situation, it's how do I thrive? How do I fit into this world? What do I do that's going to get me what I need? Whatever those questions are, then we go on the hero's journey and we work it out and we learn stuff along the way, some good, some bad. And then I think there's a period where we've sort of come to the end of that journey and we've kind of like, we rest for a moment and we're like, wow. And I think that's usually around sort of 35 to sort of 45. There's a moment where we go, wow, that was interesting. You know, what have I learned? And that's when I think a lot of men can get lost in that space, because the question isn't as easy as how do I survive, how do I thrive anymore. It's either worked or it hasn't. And you're there in the remains of that going, there must be something else. And that's often the question that men around that are. If you dig into what's going on for them, they will come to, there must be something else.
Do you think that's a biological time clock, or do you think that's the fact that they probably married, had kids and got the job by that point, which previously we might have assumed were the answers, right? Like, yeah. That's what we chase, isn't it?
Yeah.
So which one of those two, if not both, do you think could be triggering that, like, oh my God, there must be more than this and I'm 40?
I think it's a combination of both.
Okay.
I think biologically we've probably got to a stage where we've had our kids, or at least our sort of first family, you know, these days.
Yeah.
So there's that thing. And also, you know, biologically the testosterone is starting to slow down now. There's a biological settling that's going on and a maturing. But also I think, you know, the model that we have mapped out for us by society is, that's it. You need to have made it by then. You've made it or not made it. And so I think all those combination of two things lead us to take stock at that period. And that's when I personally believe the second hero's journey starts, where we're like, what's the question that's going to take me through this second part of my life? And it's usually around meaning. How do I find meaning in one way or another is what we're asking, I believe. And that pondering leads us to sort of go, well, it led for me anyway, to kind of go, hang on, who do I need around me? Who are the sort of people that I need around me? What's the sort of community that I do? How do I contribute to that community? How do I build security? How do I find... Because I think in many ways in this society, we're sold a lie. And I think the lie is that somehow we're looking for happiness. Everyone's looking for happiness. And I don't believe that's true.
No, not me.
I believe everyone's looking for meaning.
Mm.
What is the point of me being here? You know, I think that's ultimately what we're looking for. And meaning, if you can find meaning, it gets you through the time of unhappiness. Much better than a search for happiness. Because we're never going to have happiness all the time.
No, it's fleeting, right?
It's fleeting.
When you say find purpose or meaning, rather, do you then, like, are you talking about we have to create that? We're not born with a specific purpose, right? Or we're not here for a specific reason. It's like we're here. Like, now your purpose is to create one.
Yeah.
Like, and some of that discovery happens on the Mankind Project.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we do on the New Warrior Training Adventure is to develop a mission of purpose, we call it. So you come up with a simple mission statement that really acts as a compass for living your life, and the processes on the weekend are there to strip away the kind of sociological stuff that you may have come, or the stuff that you've been taught you should need. And it goes by, and usually it goes by looking at what your wound was. So what's the scars you have from life so far, and how can you build a meaning from that? So for me, for example, mine was very much around, because of the upbringing, my dad was a career criminal. He was a gangster, basically, in the East End of London. And so my experience of men was hyper competitive. You know, it was one of, my dad used to have a saying where he'd say to me, son, you're either predator or you're prey. And that was really much how I lived my life. And that was the experience of men that I had around me, was everyone was jostling for position, because safety was at the top. And if you're at the bottom, it was hell. And no one wanted to be at the bottom of that pecking order. And so when I first went on my NWTA, I didn't realise it at the time, but as soon as I got there and I could let go of a lot of that, I was exhausted. I was exhausted by constantly looking out for microaggressions and jostling for position, and everything was a threat. Even a joke was a threat. You know, is he trying to get one over on me? What's he trying to do? And so I'd felt very isolated and very sort of judgmental of others, and that had wounded me and kept me feeling separate from other people. So I developed a mission, which is, I create a world of abundance and awe-inspiring community by loving you exactly as you are, and myself exactly as I am, and choosing to be magnificent, powerful and present right now. And so that's always at the forefront of my mind. Not meaning that I do that every time, but if I'm lost, if I'm asked to do something, like say even like coming up from London to come and do this thing, I'll go, is that taking me further away to that mission or closer to that mission? Well, it's about creating community. It's about spreading what I do. Right, let's jump on the train. Let's go do it. And so, yeah, finding that meaning is an integral part of what helping men find that meaning is an integral part of what the Mankind Project is about.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds awesome. How have you remained competitive then? Because I'm assuming that, like, I understand what your dad was saying, right? Like, and even now, I still go back to my default of there's an element of truth in that. Like, but again, boundaries and how far that pendulum is swinging, it's dependent. And then also on the like love you as you are situation. Is there a danger that that we accept too little of ourselves when we say that? So I understand the concept of loving myself as I am. But there's a Jordan Peterson saying that, you know, but you could be so much more. Yeah. So like, how do we incorporate that message?
Well, I mean, for me, it's in the choosing to be magnificent, powerful and present. So for me, there's a paradox that I think everyone has to get to. Well, I say that, it helped me when I got to it, was that I've got to love myself right now. If I wasn't to change, if I wasn't to improve or do anything different, I have to love myself absolutely, completely, just as I am. But that doesn't mean I don't expect more from myself.
Mm.
I think it used to be by fathering all men and fathering myself, because that was the energy that I think there is. It's like, you know, my son's here today. Like, I'll love him absolutely, completely, however he is. But my job is to go, but you can be so much more, you know?
Sure.
I expect the best from you, because your life's going to be better if you expect the best from yourself. You're going to enjoy your life more. You're going to amaze yourself with of the possibilities. And I believe that's the same for all of us. I love myself exactly as I am, and I try to remind myself that what I'm possible of being is limitless. If I choose to tap into it, and that's where the choice bit comes for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's not many things that aren't paradoxical. You're hearing this, Luca? So, would you manage Luca like you would yourself then? So, would you say, Luca, I love you, no matter what. I'm your dad, and I love you, and I'll accept you for who you are totally. But we want to make sure that you make the most out of this life and push yourself because of X, Y, and Z. So, do you have that same communication with yourself, where you go, I love who I am?
When I'm at my best.
When you're at your best, yeah.
You know, when I'm at my best.
Yeah, sure.
And of course, there's moments where I ain't.
Of
and
course.
I'm just like, oh my God, what are you? You know?
Oh, good. So you have those too, right? Yeah. Is that good dialogue? Are they good questions to ask? Like, what are you? What are you doing with your life? Like, is it acceptable to hate upon yourself a little bit and beat upon yourself?
I think so. I mean, my dad, his favourite stock line to me when I misbehaved, and I never realised at the time how much damage it had done, was he'd go, what's wrong with you? Right, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? What's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? And when I started getting involved in kind of developing myself and looking at what drives my behaviours, and I realised that subconsciously I'd been trying to answer that question for most of my adult life. What's wrong with me? You know, there's something wrong with me, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. And it was just programming in some way. That question had opened a loop. But if I can do it from a place of loving and accepting myself, what's wrong with me is a great question, because it's also what could I change? And you know, I don't know what your religious beliefs are. I would say I'm spiritual, not religious. But whatever anyone believes, this particular combination of physicality and consciousness is brief. So surely I'm here to delight in what's possible in this life in some way, including me, and in trying to help everyone have a life as great as it can be. Sure, that's what we're all here for in some way, just to enjoy this as much as we can and to get as much meaning out of it before it vanishes. It's a brief gift that we have. So I think those questions like that can be good, as long as it's not a punisher. As long as you're not punishing yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Something we work really hard on inside of the Better Man is crafting good questions, because there's like, well, what the fuck's wrong with me? And then there's like, what can I change in my life that will make me better? Like they're both similar questions, but one's encouraging some kind of meaningful action. Yeah. And the other can just be, like you say, the pitiful sitting there annihilating yourself, just driving yourself further in, which sounds like, well, why would anyone do that? But we do it. Yeah. We do it.
Counterintuitive, but we do. On a grand scale.
Yeah, but it feels very natural to do that. It feels natural to put yourself down. Again, I'm sure this is dependent on, the experiences you've had in life. Yeah. But when you trace it back, I can trace back to when I was 6 years old, talking to myself like a piece of shit. 6 years old, So I'm good at it because I've practiced it for 30 years. So it doesn't feel natural to speak any other way to yourself. But like you say, when you reframe it, you would never speak to anyone like that you cared about.
No, and that's where, bringing us back to your first sort of question, that's where I think men's groups are so important. Because in a men's group, I can turn up and go, this is what I'm thinking at the moment. Like, I'm down on myself this way. And a good men's group, and by good, I mean one that is... it hasn't just become a place to come together and moan.
Yeah.
You know, there's some robust challenge in there. Is creating that fathering energy that we're talking about. It's like, I always say that my men's group, like, I'm in a really good men's group, and I say that it's good because what we do is I'll carry you over the line if you need carried, and sometimes I'll push you over the line. You know, there's an element of that fathering energy in there of, you've just got to do this. You've got to stop doing that and start doing this, right? Because you're in a loop, and I can't get you out of it. But how are you going to get yourself out of it? And how can I support you getting out of it? Just like you watch a child fall when it first starts to walk, and you're there to help them and encourage them and pick them up when it doesn't go well. And so, you know, if you look at that also brings us back to what I was talking about with kind of the Industrial Revolution. The story I tell is, well, scenario really, is we talk about depression a lot, you know, in society now. If you would have been depressed pre-Industrial Revolution, the likelihood of what would have happened is you'd have been in your wherever you were living, feeling like nothing is working out for you, right? And there'd been a knock on the door, right? Because it's time for the harvest to come in, for example, right? So you're a pair of hands, right? So you're needed. So there'd be a knock on your door, and it would be, I don't care how you're feeling, this has got to come in. We've got to get this done now, or it will spoil. So out you come. So out you would come. So from that, my experience of working with men is men usually have quite a good time when they work together. There's usually a real playfulness when there's a clear task to be done. So from that, you'd have got a sense of connection. I'm needed by my community. They've come and got me, so I feel connected. The work would have been difficult, and there was a challenge to get it in on time. So there was a sense of challenge for you to do your part well. So there'd be an expectation of you being competent. So you'd have got that challenge. You'd have got a sense of contribution from that, because you know when the job is done, I've helped feed my community. And in every culture there seems to be some harvest celebration. So it comes in, and guess what? Let's all celebrate now, right? Great job. You were part of it. To me, that's the antidote to depression. Get a sense of connection, a sense of challenge, a sense of contribution to others, and a sense of celebration. If you talk to people who are feeling depressed, often they will say, I feel isolated. Every day just feels the same. What's the point? I don't feel like what I do matters to anyone, and I don't get no real enjoyment out of it. That's the opposite of those 4 C's. So a men's group will help you bring that into your life more. And I think that's that thing we were talking about with being in the second part of a journey, is it's like, how do I bring those things into my life more? That's usually what we're asking on some level. How do I be more than this? How does it matter more? How can my life matter more? Where's the meaning?
That makes total sense. I mean, we did a charity climb up Snowdon with those 50 guys there, and all of those 4 C's that you've mentioned were, you know, they appeared on that day. So there was the gathering of the guys. There was lots of banter flying around, which again worries me because I don't want to lose that. Even the word banter now, people don't like that word.
Yeah. Oh, is it banter?
It's
You're
ridiculous.
like, yeah, it is.
Absolutely. I don't think we should ever stray away from that. It's playful. And it's strange because I only have real good banter with people that I care about and like. You know, I don't have banter with someone that I don't know or like. You know, it's just not natural. So it's a sign of affection for me. It always has been. We climbed the mountain, and the challenge was that all 50 of us had to get up and down. So again, there's contribution and challenge in there. And then after, we had either a can of Coke or a Beck's Blue or a bottle of beer. Yeah. And there's your celebration. There's your reward. And you kind of like, you kind of feel what lights you up, don't you, Laurence? You kind of try and tap in, okay, what is it about that made me feel really good?
Oh, yeah.
And then how can I take that from one day a year, climbing a mountain and being in the fresh air, to maybe, you know, one day a month or one day a week or every day of my life?
Yeah.
That's kind of my mission now. I kind of like these podcasts. I love them. What do I love? It's the connection, the communication, the conversation, the topic, the passion. So how can I spread that throughout the week?
Yeah.
So it's not just an hour and a half. It's every day I get to taste it. And I think that's the challenge. But, you know, that's difficult.
Yeah.
That's difficult to do because we automatically go to, well, there's bills to pay. You know, there's shit to do. There's, you know, I've got to be a husband. I've got to be a dad. But I'm guessing you would educate the guys how to discover meaning with all those things in play, right?
Well, within that, I mean, I personally think that the system that I use that works for me is I look at those 4 C's and I look at them in terms of me, my family, my communities, and the planet.
In that order.
In that order.
Yeah.
So I go, right, connection. How am I connecting to myself? What time am I taking to connect with myself? How's my connection going with my family? Am I spending enough time with them? Are they getting enough of me?
Can I just go back to that connection with yourself?
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah,
What does that look like for you?
So connection with myself looks like just taking the time out to understand how I really feel, to spend time with myself in ways that nourish me and do the things that I enjoy. Like maybe if it's just taking time to read, taking time to, rather than just jump in the shower every day, just take a time to have a bath. Just time to kind of spend time with me in a way that connects me with what I want. So also thinking about the things that are important to me, thinking about where I'm going, just taking stock.
Have you ever had any issues or problems knowing how you feel? Because again, a lot of what I hear guys saying is, yeah, I don't know how I'm feeling. I don't know what I feel.
I mean, that was one of the great gifts that the Mankind Project gave me, actually, was a set of tools to really be able to understand how I'm feeling. And not just for me to understand how I'm feeling, but be able to express it to other people.
Yeah, well, that's the second part of the problem,
And
right? Okay, I know how I feel, but telling you, I don't know where to start.
Yeah, and one of the ways that, one of the things that I learned, that I was taught through, there's a training we do after called primary integration training, which is you take the weekend is a big impact, and then there's a follow-on training which comes in the price of the course, which helps break it down in a gentler period afterwards. And one of the things I learned in there was, as a culture, we tend to confuse thoughts with feelings. And so, you know, even in language, we'll say like, I think he's treating me like an idiot, right? Well, there's 2 things there you need to break up. One is there's a story going on in your mind that person is talking to you like you're an idiot. You don't know that, right? Because that's your story playing out. It might remind you of how someone spoke to you before, how your dad spoke to you, how some kids at school spoke to you. May or may not be the truth about that person. And then there's the feeling after that. Okay, when you tell yourself a story that someone is talking to you like you're an idiot, how do you feel? And they'll often say, well, angry. So you go, right, there's 3 parts to the communication, and there's what actually happened, which was someone who spoke to you. Then there's what you think happens, which is, well, they were talking to me like I was an idiot, and that's probably based on some prior experience. And then there's the emotion. So separating thoughts from feelings was a big step for me, being able to get clarity of what's going on, because it stops up here and it brings me down to what's the feeling like, what's actually the physical feeling that I'm feeling at the moment. And also we encourage men to use a very small palette of emotions. So anger, sadness, fear and joy. Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling fearful? Are you feeling joyful? By being able to use a smaller palette and not, it makes it easier for you to understand. If I say I'm feeling angry, you probably know what angry feels like. If I say, yeah, you know, I'm feeling like I'm a little bit resentful of the world. I'm feeling like everyone's out to get me. That's a different. there's so much in there that could be different to your experience than it is to my experience. Whereas anger, sadness, fear, and joy, we tend to have a sense of what they feel like in our bodies if we close our eyes. So separating thoughts from feelings and having a basic palette of emotions really helped me be able to work out actually what's going on for me, what's up here, and then what's happening in my body, and how can I express that to others in a way that they'll understand.
I think that's a lot of problem for guys, the time gap between thought and feeling and reaction.
Yeah.
So it's instant thought, instant reaction, boom.
Yeah, done.
Yeah.
And suddenly,
Too late.
I'm in.
Yeah, and I get that.
I'm in,
I
and
get
it's
that.
done.
Yeah, that's what I'm working really hard on now, just separating, creating some space, just questioning.
Yeah.
Like the thoughts that are going on in my head, just questioning them is a big help. It's hard.
Yeah. It's really hard.
It's really, really hard because they are real until
real.
you break them down.
And it's, the example I use is,
Excuse me.
if you're walking down the road and someone bumps into you, right? You might think, whatever. Oh, they're busy, whatever. You come the fifth person who's bumped into you that day. By this point, you're telling yourself a very different story about what's going on in the world, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the truth about the fifth person. The fifth person probably thinking exactly the same thing as the first person. They weren't thinking about you at all. They were probably in a rush, right? But because of what we historically carry with us, when Jung is talking about the sack of shadows, the shadows we carry with us based on our behaviour, it means something different. And if you were bullied at school, someone bumping into you might be a very different experience to if you was the bully at school. Your reaction is going to be different. So our reactions are based on our thoughts because they're based on what this means about me and my relationship to others in the world. And based on that, we create an emotion. So being able to separate that and question it is often the gap that's needed for your reaction to be one that's probably more beneficial to you than negative to you.
Sure.
But it's a tough game to learn.
It's ridiculously simple in when we're talking about it. Like, that makes total sense. But doing that is, it's tremendously hard, yeah. So the connection with yourself, like, that's important. Then it's family time, right? So it's the connection to your wife,
Yep.
your son. You've got more kids?
No, just the one.
Is that enough, yeah?
It's a
So
handful.
so you got your connection to your family.
And
What does that look like for you?
so that's just making sure that they have access to me and I have enough access to them.
Okay.
And that when I do, I'm present.
Yeah.
Rather than just nicking the time.
Yeah,
But
sure.
actually going, let's really spend time to be with each other. And also that they know they're getting my attention
Yeah.
and that I'm there for them and my support.
And you initiate this, right, as dad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, when I'm at my better versions of
Sure.
myself, but it's a process that I go through physically. Is looking at the 4 C's and looking at them in terms of myself, my family, the community, and the planet.
Yeah, I like that. I haven't heard of the addition of the planet, so let's go there because I'm intrigued.
It's how can I say it? I'm becoming a bit of a hippie in my old age.
Go on, tell me what a hippie looks like.
Well, I mean, it's whatever I like. I'm starting to discover more and more how much of an animal that I am. Right.
Oh, fucking love it. Go on,
And
tell me more.
In terms of like, however I want to dress it up, right? I'm just another primate. I'm just a different type of primate, right? I'm just whether we're the storytelling monkey or whatever we are, right? I believe I'm just another primate, right? And I think some of the greatest damage that's been done to us as humans is to separate us from that. It's almost like the big secret. I sometimes think the idea of original sin is that we're animals. If you look at a lot of the structures that are put around, I think they're there to separate us from feeling like animals in some way. And if you look at all the great art, it's always about the interplay between us struggling with our more animalistic urges And I think that the biggest symptom of that is that I know for a long time I no longer felt like I was part of the natural world. Like there's humans, and then there's animals, and then there's trees, and then there's the sea, and then there's the sky, right? And really it's just a massive big network, and I can't exist without it, right? And so on some level now I have to look at how I contribute to the world, and how I connect with nature.
Yeah, so tell me more about, like, how do you do that?
Well,
And just come to this market.
yeah,
sorry, mate.
I mean, I'm a city boy, so it took a while for me to appreciate the trees and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, especially because I was a skateboarder, I was like, more concrete, please. Let's have some of that. But I now realise that this is how I think of it: is if this didn't exist, right? If this life didn't exist, right, and or even if you looked outside and those trees, that sky, those birds, and things, none of those existed, and some sort of programmer came along and said, listen, I've made this thing, right? We would pay everything we have to experience it, right? We'd pay everything we have to experience it. Like there's an analogy that says, how much is your day worth? And it's like, if I could give you £1 million, but you would never wake up again, you wouldn't want the £1 million, right? Because what can you do with it? You're dead. It's pointless. So we're all rich, right? We're all rich. Every day is worth more than £1 million. If you're a millionaire and is Elon Musk on his deathbed, you say, would you give it all up for another year? He would, unless he's psychotic, he would say yes, because what you gonna do with it? You can't take it with you. So, in a way, I realised that I was living a life like a poor man, surrounded by money that I wasn't picking up, because it's here. This life is so brief. It's so brief, and if you take everything away and you look at it, it's such a fantastic experience we have for like 80 goes around the sun, if we're lucky. And I mean, this is rawer for me because my mum died last week. So I'm very in touch with the fact of how brief this life is. That I was walking around like I've got the greatest short-term ride. I'm on the greatest short-term ride that exists, maybe the only one. And if I'm not taking time to connect with that and to look at how amazing is that tree, how fantastic is that river? Imagine if you've never saw water before and you touched it for the first time, how amazing it would be. If I'm not connecting with that, I'm selling myself short. There's a massive resource that I'm not tapping into. I'm just walking around thinking about me and my life. So it has to ripple out for me, bigger than just the communities that I'm connecting with. I have to somehow connect with the world and the planet and what it means for us to be alive and be on this planet today. And that's the hippie that I've turned into.
Yeah. See, I don't see that as hippie. Like, I mean, that's brilliant. Like, as you get a bit older, you start to, well, I have anyway, started to head towards that direction too.
Yeah.
Starting to be, and again, I don't know whether it's through all the hard work that I've done or it's just, it's just evolution. I'm maturing. I don't know whether your eyes are opened or whether you opened them. But what you've just said is fascinating. How do you then go about living a normal life, one where you can earn money, and do normal things, like, because your awareness is so acute and you're so aware that this is so short, like, does it change every interaction that you have? Does it change everything that you do? Or do you have to constantly remind yourself every day of the things that you've just said? My life is short, this is magnificent, therefore I have to do these things. I can't get dragged into what we would call domesticated world or normal world. Yeah,
to me it comes back to meaning, right? Because, and I often find this a paradox within, say, Buddhism, for example, right? Where Siddhartha, on his journey, there was a period where he became the moneylender. He became the alcoholic. He became the womanizer. And when his first disciple found him, said, "What's happened to you, Siddhartha?" He said, I can't experience the life. How can I judge the life of man and existence if I haven't lived the life of man? And I think the danger of wanting to connect with things on that bigger level is that it can make the other stuff seem mundane.
Yes.
And actually, it's not. That's the life.
Yeah.
Me sitting here with you now drinking this coffee is life. It's a part of my life. The domestic stuff is the work you have to do to pay your bills is a privilege in a way that you won't always have, right? And so the mundane, the micro is the macro, and the macro is the micro. You know, like do we think the ant carrying his bit of sugar back is mundane? Well, of course he isn't. He's doing what an ant does, and there's periods where we do what men do, or what humans do, and it's as beautiful as the sunrise, because it's the same thing. It's ultimately the same thing. If I'm on a train to come here, that's as magnificent as sitting on the end of the Grand Canyon, because someone's never seen a train before. So it's all part of it. Just as the pleasure is the pain and the pain is the pleasure. It's all stock of life. And one day we won't have it.
No, I love that perspective. And you've taught yourself this perspective, right? You weren't born with this perspective.
No, not at all.
No.
You know, I was just like, I just need a new pair of trainers and a skateboard and I'll be happy, right? And that was it. And then I had to go through all the stuff that I sort of went through in a way. And still, I find my life is very circular. So I often feel that it's a constant journey back home. Like sometimes I'll go off on a tangent and this thing seems really important to me and this has to happen and no, and then that'll go on for a while and it works and it don't, and then suddenly I go, oh yeah, I'm back here again.
That sounds familiar. Yeah,
it's like I'm back here again. I'm back home again, and let me recuperate, and off I go again on the next little tangent of life and come back and regroup. And I think there is this sense of my life feels very much like the sea. I'm often going out, and then every now and again I'll come back to the beach, and that's me home, as when I'm appreciating everything as much as I can. And I think that's also what Ram Dass is talking about when he talks about we're all walking each other home. I really loved that line, because I think that's what we are doing in some way. We're all just walking ourselves back to realising that we're alive right now. And that's it. That's all there is.
How old are you, Laurence, if you don't mind asking?
I'm 48.
48. Yeah, so I'm 37. I'll be 38 like in a month or two. Do you feel like these lessons have just... Do you feel like you're awake now because you're 48 and you've lived the life? Like, you must know what doesn't fulfill you anymore, right? So you get to a point where you know the material world isn't the thing that you search for, but like you had to search for it in order to know that.
Yeah.
So you can read the books, you can have the lessons off people, but I still thought the material world was going to be awesome, no matter what anyone told me.
Yeah.
So you go and search for that.
And I still think parts of it would be. There's part of me now that thinks,
sure,
yeah, I'd love to have much more because I could do this, and this. So I've not sort of given up on that bit either. I think that's part of what we do. That's the ant again.
Yeah.
I think part of us want that material, right? It's like, but it can't become all of us. It can't become where our identity is. I've got to be the same person whether I'm wearing a Timex or a £500,000 Rolex. If I think I'm a better person because I'm wearing a £500,000 Rolex, I've lost, right? But if I can just enjoy wearing the Rolex because I've worked hard and got one, fantastic, right? But if I have to have it for me to feel complete, then I've lost.
So how's life different for you now, approaching 50 versus when you're in your late 30s? Like, what over the last, say, 10 years, what would you say has really changed as you've evolved, as you've learned through doing all of the work with the Mankind Project? Like, what's really changed for you? What, if you had to sum it up and say it's been worth it because?
It's been worth it because I now have much more control over how I feel and much more understand myself than I had previously. So I'm really quite self-sufficient internally. You know, not that I don't need, but that I know I need people, and I know how to ask, and I'm more comfortable with my vulnerability. Actually, I think the biggest learning for me was I thought that strength came from invincibility, and now I know that my strength's my vulnerability. If I'm willing to tell people how exactly as I'm feeling, and then in a way you become, then in a way I am invincible, because I am what I am, and what's anyone going to say about that? You know, that's where my strength is by being willing to show myself, be vulnerable, understand myself, and, you know, realizing that life is a sequence of really good times and taking it on the chin sometimes, you know, and not in some macho way of letting it just fall off and it doesn't matter, but really taking it in and going, yeah, that hurt, and guess what, I'm still alive, I'm still moving. You know, so I think having an understanding of myself has been the greatest gift, and that was a real gift, because I was always prone to like existential crisis. Like even as a kid, I was like, I'm not sure why I'm really here. What does this mean? You know, the classic thing of, is this all my dream? You know, I had all them thoughts when I was a kid, and I was always prone to existential crisis, and I think depression on some level, and being able to understand that and work with that, and being able to have it in front of me rather than here, has been a liberation.
Yeah, I don't think I really understood that there was strength in vulnerability when I was younger. I really don't think I understood it. And again, you could have sat and explained it to me, and still it wouldn't have got on board with me.
Yeah.
What you've just said is really powerful, because you've mentioned the word exhausted on this podcast and on your website, and that's what it feels like when you're trying to be strong all the time, and you're not trying to show the cracks in your game and your weaknesses. Like, you do have to put on that front, like you do, and you're trying to be that guy, you know, and that's addictive, because you fall in love with that guy that's strong and can't be hurt, and that, you know, gets up and grinds and hustles and you can't touch me kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when you do own who you are, like you say, no one can really touch you then. You don't have anything to hide. One of the reasons I'm writing is because there were so many skeletons in my closet that I could feel these things trying to break out, man. And I was like, I can't keep this shit in much longer. This, you know, this hard guy image thing isn't really who I am. At the core, I'm quite scared.
Yeah.
And to even just write that down to myself was quite liberating.
Well, and it also goes back to what we were talking to about, you know, that finding meaning and purpose. And, you know, when I said it often comes from the wounds and the scars.
Sure.
From that is, that's often the moment, I think, if we're lucky, that we get to, where we go, we get enough self-awareness to be able to look back and go, this is the stuff that didn't work for me, these are the bits that hurt me, but there's so much growth in that if I can look into it and express it, and if I can share the mechanisms I've had for healing it, then often we will find that, you know, our greatest wound was actually what's going to be the meaning that carries us forward now.
Sure.
What happened to me before? How do I make sure that doesn't happen anymore? How do I help other people with that? How do I make sure I never feel that again? That often is the answer to what drives us through to the second part of our life, I think. The poison is in the medicine, you know, the other way around. The medicine is in the poison. You know, we know that from nature.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And talking about paradoxes, it's strange, because I teach men how to become tougher, but I think that is such a valuable skill. So I used to worry that if I became vulnerable, I'd lose the tough side, the warrior side, and it's actually the opposite. Like, you have to be very tough to be vulnerable. Like, you have to be very thick-skinned to allow things into your life that could hurt you.
Yeah.
So that kind of myth has been dispelled, and now I see, you know, toughness training as a way to encourage guys to be more courageous, to get outside of their homes, to speak up, to speak how they're really feeling, say how they're really feeling, because that takes a lot of courage.
And it's really valuable. I mean, I think one of the, I think there is a sort of, I'm not sure if demonization is the right word, but there's definitely a sort of a narrative that the toughness in men and the strength in men is not desirable or is dangerous in some way, when actually I'm safe when I know I'm dangerous. And if I put that away, if I try and not have the toughness that I have, if I try to always kind of hide that stuff from away, one, it damages me, and two, actually, I don't think the world needs that right now. There are times in our lives, unfortunately, where we may have to take a stand for stuff we believe in, and it could cost us our lives. We've seen that throughout history, right? And part of being a man, I think, is enjoying that competence, of enjoying I could handle that situation should that come up. There is a desire in me to protect. There is a desire in me to be able to protect myself and my young one and my loved ones. And I think as men, on some level, we know that we may be asked to put our lives on the line for things. I think it's only a very brief period in history now where we're not. In this culture, people all around the world are.
I was going to say, all the time. People would probably instantly hear you and challenge that, but it's like you say, it's happening as we speak.
It's happening all the time. There's people putting their lives down, men.
But it's mainly men, though, isn't it?
But it's
right?
mainly men.
And it's accepted that it's like, do you not feel... this is why this is difficult to talk about, because if I say, men are expected to die in war, if it was women and children, it'd be very different. I'm not saying any of this is right, and it would not be right if women and children were to join and put their lives on the line. But why is it accepted that men will fight wars and die? So like in the Vietnam War, for example, and all the bullshit that went with it, many men's lives were lost, affected everyone around the world, women, children as well. Yeah. But why does it seem accepted that that's okay? Why would the men take the hit on that path, but then in other scenarios it's not okay for the men to be the dominant force?
Well, one of the obvious arguments would probably be that we tend to start them. So
men start wars.
Men tend to start wars. We tend to fight each other. There seems to be. I'm not really sure where that comes from. If you break it down, probably biologically, it's coming down to resources and breeding rights. Right?
And meaning as well, right? Because if we talk about meaning,
that's the story, isn't it?
That's what I mean. That
keeps us going.
Yeah.
So whether it be religious wars or political wars or whatever, we need a story that we fight for.
Because I'm sure Russian soldiers now have, they possibly believe they're doing the right thing for the greater good.
But I think if it comes down to that bit of us being animals, it's like most animals behave relatively well if there's enough resources.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like this society we're in now, right? It's however you want to look at it, we're moving towards a fairer society, I think. But come a situation where we had complete economic collapse, right? It'd be a very different scenario. It'd be a very different story. And if there's a scarcity of resources, your biggest problem is other men, right? That's your biggest problem, is the other men who want the resources that you have, right? And I think that's why men war, really, is the if you look at history, it's not easy to live as a human on this planet, right? You need a lot of stuff, right? You need a lot of food. And if you look at the history of it, like the sort of myth of the peaceful hunter-gatherer living in peace with the land, it's just not true. We slaughtered. They find graves where we slaughtered the other ones we come across, the other clans of hunter-gatherers that we come across, because the fear was there wouldn't be enough.
Yeah.
And I think all we're doing is we've just made that bigger and bigger and bigger. So the governments are consistently worried that there's not enough. So they're still battling for scarcity, really. And we're going to see that on a massive scale soon.
Well, we've seen it already. Like, can you remember when the first lockdown happened and people were fighting over toilet rolls?
Yeah. I mean, that's how quickly it is.
Yeah,
right?
you're right.
That's how quickly it is. That's how fragile our society is.
Yeah, logic goes out the window, right? And it's scarcity and emotion drives that. I'm getting that toilet roll before you.
Yeah.
And people will fight for it.
People will fight. And that's why men, I think, fight wars.
Okay.
And that's why I think we're asked to fight the war as well, because we tend to sort of kick them off in a way.
It's okay, that's valid. Going back to what you were saying about the lessons that your dad taught you about, get to the top. This is where I could pull it back and say, well, isn't he onto something? Isn't there a part of that he's kind of like, he's got a point? Like, while everything's smooth, you might not need to worry about fighting to the top, son. But when shit happens, and you want to be up there.
And in his world, it was.
Yeah.
That was the truth to him. He weren't trying to damage me.
No, sure, I get that.
In his mind, he was setting me up for, son, this is the truth in the world, right? Is in this world, and he grew up, and I grew up, very poor, working class East London. It was tough, and the truth was, if you wasn't predator, you were prey. That was the truth in that situation. But I think it's more about, we have a choice now of changing things, because we don't have the scarcity of resource at the moment. And should we come to a situation where that is, it would be nice if we'd evolved enough as men that we could still have the competence that we would need, and the bravery and the courageousness we would need to keep society well, but without the need for dominance, and just do it in a more collaborative way. There's a different element, I think, coming into masculinity that's very important, which is becoming more collaborative and wanting to protect in a way which has power with rather than power over. And I think previously there's been a lot of, we need power over each other. And I'm hoping we're moving towards a space where we can have power with.
Sure. Although we can sit here and we can, be logical about this and say, well, there is enough resources for everyone right now. Do you think the brain has caught up with that, though? Do you think we're still in that part, like, it's in us, it's nature to fight, it's nature to be the dominant force? It's because there's some argument.
I think we're in a very dangerous time.
Do you?
I think we could potentially be in a very dangerous time, because it wouldn't take much. As well, we see it. There was, when was it? 5-6 years ago? There was riots in London.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't take much, and what my personal hope is that we can build, and this is why the world doesn't need weak men. Right. The world needs powerful men, because if that does happen, I hope there's enough of us who go, yes, this is happening, but we are keeping this society safe. We're keeping those most vulnerable in our society safe. We want to be in a situation where we can protect, because we've learnt the lessons of history. And if you look at history, it's always collapse, and then the new barbarians come at the gates and they set up a system that suits them, and it perpetuates. And so I think it's about changing our awareness and moving towards a more positive model of masculinity, which doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
What do you think about the feminist movement then?
What do I think about the feminist movement? I think it's necessary.
You do?
I think it's absolutely
And I'm only
necessary.
asking that because when you use the word protection, one of the arguments that I hear is that we, from a woman's point, we want to be able to get our own resources, and we don't need protection. We don't need protecting. Now, I would always challenge that, and I always think, surely we're here to protect and look after each other, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman. Like, don't we need protectors in the world?
We all need protectors.
Yeah.
Everyone needs
So
protectors.
it just
And that's
isn't
why
a
it's about
valid
us
argument for
working
me.
together.
Yes.
And that's why I think feminism is necessary, because there's different ways of protecting.
Okay.
And so, I don't think, for me personally, like equality isn't a finite resource. It's like equality just means more for everyone, right?
Equality of
everything.
Outcome or opportunity?
Of outcome.
Really?
Yeah. Well, not of outcome in terms of everyone should have exactly the same in the world. I think it's opportunity there. But
Yes.
I think an outcome of safety, yes. I think there is enough. We have enough to be able to create safety, because we create each other's in safety. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about safety, yes, then I think equality of outcome is, we all need to be as safe as each other. Everyone should be as safe to live the life they want to live.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we should work towards that.
Yeah, I'm thinking more. So equality of opportunity for me is hugely important. So everyone gets a fair shot.
Yeah.
Doesn't always mean that it's going to equal an equal outcome. So, for example, let's just say, I don't know, 100 positions for firefighter.
Right.
50 men apply, 50 women apply, and the only rule is it can be only the best firefighters that get the job, i.e. pass the test, the fastest, the strongest. If all 50 are men that come in the top 50 and the women come in the bottom 50, I would still want 50 men to be firefighters versus 25-25, because if I'm in a fire, or if my kid's in a fire, or my whoever, I just want the best.
You want the best firefighter.
Yeah, I don't care whether it's a woman, a man, someone of black or white. I don't care. I just want the best person. So I think it's dangerous searching for equality of outcome, but equality of opportunity for sure.
Yeah, but then there is a difference in that with how you judge what makes a good firefighter. Because you could actually go, well, is it the person who's better at preventing fires necessarily from the person who's better at running in and dragging people down the stairs? So there is a different, it's not always an easy metric.
Okay, sure, but that still wouldn't negate the whole, it doesn't matter whether we get 50 men or 50 women through the door. It shouldn't matter, I don't believe.
Yeah.
But you'll get that in swings and roundabouts.
You'll get that in swings and roundabouts.
What I'm saying is I don't think we should be searching for equality, searching for opportunity for everyone, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think, haven't they done this in Scandinavia, where they've given people, equality of opportunity, and the outcome has gone exactly where they thought it wouldn't go. So it hasn't become more even. It's become more male dominated in certain areas and more female dominated, because natural selection has taken us there.
Yeah, and I think as societies we go through different stages. And I think that we're at a stage of sort of trying to work out something new. And I think there's bumps in the there's going to be bumps in the road.
Of course,
and sometimes it will swing further than it swings. But if ultimately we're moving towards a space where everyone can live a life of freedom, acceptance, and opportunity, then everything will find its sort of natural footing of where we want.
Yeah, I agree.
And I just think that sometimes you have to swing a little bit further sometimes and swing back. And I think that's where we are at the moment as a society. I think we're testing a lot of stuff out.
Yes.
And well, we can't know the answers till we do. That's how evolution works.
Yeah, and the problem with movements is the further the pendulum has swung, it's got to swing back, and it will often swing back too far the other way. So that equilibrium, that middle, that centre ground is actually quite difficult to find.
And I think you're seeing that.
Yeah.
I think you're seeing that in, an example of that with the Andrew Tate stuff at the moment. I think...
Yeah, I don't know much about... I'm not a big follower of anyone on socials, so I hear his name coming up, and I've seen the odd clip, but I don't really bite too much onto it.
No, but I think a lot of people have with him.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit.
So, he is the pendulum swinging back.
Because he's the alpha.
Yeah, he's like, listen, I'm a G. If you're smoking a big cigar and, I drive a Bugatti, and if you're my woman, you stay in the house. And all
Right.
that, right? And of course, there's a load of disenfranchised men
Yeah.
going, yeah, he's right, isn't it? We would have been so much happier
Right.
before.
Okay.
How much happier were we when women stayed at home? I don't actually believe we were,
Mm.
right? If you look at those times that everyone is going back in the good old days, right? It was often men crawling 7 miles through a mine to work. You know, it wasn't particularly brilliant for anyone. And so he is an example of me, of the pendulum swinging the other way, and the resistance that's going up against feminism, right? Where I believe we have got to support feminism. I believe we have to, because that's a voice that's asking to be heard, and we've got to make space for those voices, because I don't have all the answers, and another voice might have the answer, and I don't think we've ever reached a society that was perfect.
Yeah.
Right? So let's just listen to each other and see what's going on, and
Sure.
take the bits we can take from it, and go, and that bit ain't working, and maybe we've gone a little bit far there. Let's tweak it out, but work it together. But a group of men can't get together and work out what the perfect society is going to be, because I think we've tried that a few times. So we need some other voices in there.
We do, but we need some ears as well on this. So Andrew Tate, probably, I'm guessing, has got a very large following on social media,
Yeah.
getting the attention, right?
Well, they banned him now. He's
Oh,
banned.
okay.
Right.
But you can imagine, like,
But
a
he's still
feminist
all over it, even
listening
though
to
he's
that
been
and
banned.
thinking, well, this is what a masculine man now looks like and wants. So it's so far from the
Yeah.
truth, right? Because if you speak to, I'll use the word decent, but I don't know anything about him. But if you listen to a centered guy, he couldn't be further from an Andrew Tate. He's not promoting that at all.
Yeah.
Still promoting strength in men, but that's very different
Yeah,
from
it's very different.
very, very different. But I think that's where the danger is. I think a lot of the ears are on the noise rather than the actual, centered thinking.
But I think that's the same thing with a question like, do you support feminism?
Mm.
Is that often the voices of feminism we're hearing are the Andrew Tates of feminism.
Yeah, you're so right.
Right?
Yeah, they're
And
the extremes, aren't
the
they? 'Cause
extremes, and the truth
yeah.
is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, well, the extremes are more entertaining
Yeah, I mean, you get Andrew Tate. He's much more entertaining than
against an
someone just
extreme
coming out and said,
feminist. Yeah,
like, I think it's great that we're men, and I think it's great that we're women. That's fine. It doesn't really mean
Yeah.
that much. But you get someone who goes, no, listen, you're a loser unless you have 2 Ferraris, right? It's great sound bites.
yeah,
And that's the same with the feminist movement, with the trans movement,
Yeah.
which whatever you're moving you're looking at, the average man on the street is only seeing the extremes.
yeah,
So he looks at the trans movement and says, it's a gateway to paedophilia or whatever it is. They're just trying to destroy masculinity, and the same with feminism. Well, they just hate men, but of course, because you're only listening to the
yeah,
loudest voices, and the loudest voices get air by being the most obnoxious.
yeah, for sure.
And actually, if you get down to it, I think people are just trying to say, I want to be accepted and have freedom here.
Well, that's
right?
it, isn't it? In the
And
centre,
that's really in the centre. That's all.
everyone's saying the same
and
thing.
that's where we'll work it out.
Yeah,
That's where
Hopefully.
hopefully that's where we'll work it out, and that's why. Yeah, I support feminism. Yes, I support the trans movement. Yes,
Yeah.
I support those things, because I don't necessarily support the one who's got the loudest voice, who's saying the most shock tactic things. I support the middle, where we're trying to find ways to live with each other and accept each other and give each other more freedom. And that's in those pockets. That is being worked out, in the smaller groups, and it's often there is a separation before coming together, and I think that's where we are.
but I love your principle of how you base the 4 C's on you first, then your family, then your community, and then the universe, because I believe things need to be dealt with in that order.
Yeah, me too.
So by working with a man or a group of men, I believe that, like, potentially that's how you change the world.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of that. And that's why I think everyone does count. Everyone matters.
And that's why also the things like, if you take men's personal development, for example, things like the Mankind Project, stuff like that, that's where they can change the world, because it has to start with the individual.
Sure, yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of the problems we see around the extremes of every movement is, it's often easier to jump onto an extreme, because on an extreme, when I'm at the extremity, I don't have to look at me. When I take an opposing stance.
Sorry, mate.
When I take an opposing stance, I don't have to think about me.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have to think about the role I play, because it's us and them.
Sure.
Whereas when I take a stance that is we, I've got to be involved in that, because we means us. It means I'm in there too. And so that's why I don't really pay much attention to those on the extremes, because they're the ones, in my judgment, who are they're pointing the finger out rather than pointing the finger at themselves and going, how do I change?
Sure.
And what I try and promote is, how do I change first? Then how do I ripple that out into my family? Right? There's no point me being out there telling people what's right and wrong. It's if I'm not in order, and if my family's not functioning properly, whether it's having enough or whatever it is, that's the next stage out. After that, communities. There's no point me saying I believe in equality and freedom if I'm in a group of men that are not doing that and I don't challenge it. Right? So get my communities in order and then take it out to the world.
Yeah.
And some people would argue we don't have that much time. I don't know. But that's the only way that makes sense for me. Because otherwise I'm just throwing stones.
Sure. There's only a few things that have really changed my life. One is that you've just mentioned, of everything comes back to me. So, if I'm getting pissed off at somebody or whatever shit is happening in the world, like if I'm focused on that, I'm lost.
Yeah.
So I have to come back to myself. The other thing is the power of community, being around good men that will not only support you, but tell you when they feel like you're probably not on the path that you should be on, or that you're that's been really, really important. So those two things.
And some of these things are so insidious. It's like I often think back to when my son was born, and I found myself doing that thing of like, we had a boy, great, and people going, oh boy, fantastic, and then I had to think, isn't that an interesting response I'm having? Where's that come from? That somehow the boy is more valuable in some way. Is that what's being propagated there? That there seems to be this, she's a kingmaker because she had a boy first, and all this sort of stuff. And you think, that's interesting. And if I don't change, and of course I found myself doing it. Yeah, I've got a son, I've got an heir, I've got all of those things, right? Someone's going to carry on my family name, and all of those things. And it was like, if I don't work those things out in me first, I can't ripple that out into the world. I can't make the change out in the world unless I do the work on me to make the change.
Yeah, it's interesting. The other thing that's I was going to add to that list is how I've learned how to use social media a bit better. And even over the last few weeks, my life has positively rocketed since I've got a real tight grasp of that. Because on social media is that noise that you spoke about.
Yeah.
You'll find it.
Yeah.
It's a rabbit hole. And what's shown in the news feed and what's popular on Instagram is what we've said, the extremes. It's not Mr. Boring like me. I'm never going to get massive amount of attention because I'm not prepared to say anything stupidly controversial that people go, oh my God, did he just... I'm just going to say what I think. And it's not that interesting. So those three things, like I say, the spinning it around to myself, the community, and the quietening, not just social media, my life.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to think straight if you've got 100 different songs going on in your head. If there's a wireless in the room of every room of your house.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So those few things alone. Where have we gone? Where has it gone wrong though? So if we've looked at all the things that maybe we should be aiming towards, and why do we find ourselves in this position where more men are killing themselves than ever? I heard a pretty scary stat that young girls now are they're catching the boys up in terms of self-harm and suicide. iGen generation, they call it, I think.
Right.
27 or below grew up with iPhone in their hand.
Right.
Like, why do you think guys find themselves in this position where a lot of them feel lost, maybe struggling for meaning, purpose? Like, has this always been there? I know you've mentioned the
Do you know
revolution.
what? I'm going to sound like the older man that I'm becoming.
Go for it.
In saying I think it's tougher now.
You think it's tougher now, yeah?
I think it's tougher now.
To be a man or to be just on this planet?
To be everyone.
Right, okay.
Right, because I think the phones, the social media, the constant barrage is so much more than it was. So much more.
Do you find it hard?
I find it hard. I mean, I find myself looking, I think, God, I've to spend 45 minutes on that for what?
Yeah, and you're aware, right? You're a switched on guy, 48 years of age. So can you imagine being 13?
Yeah.
Seriously, can you imagine being 13?
It's really, really difficult. And I remember, actually, there was a guy who was in Mankind Project when he was very young. And I was talking about, like, phones and using them and all that. And he said, do you realise that every time you pick up your phone when you're with your son, the message you're giving him is you're only as important as the next phone call that I get or the next bit of information that I get. I will break my time with you to look at that. And that was when I kind of thought, actually, yeah, that's become really insidious. And since then, I notice how much I am on it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's much more than I would like, right? It's even now. And why I think it makes it harder is it's so curated in some way, you know, like that's so instant, right? The gratification of that is so instant, and there's so much to judge yourself against. I'm not like that person. 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 And what it takes away is the desire for finding meaning in the smaller things. Like when I was young, I got into skateboarding, right? And there weren't the skate parks and all that like there are now. So literally I'd come home from school and I would skate a curb, right? A curb for 3 or 4 hours. And in that I was trying to learn something new. I was trying to do something new, and I'd get a sense of achievement from that. Now, I can understand why kids don't want to do that now, because if I'd have had all of that in there, I wouldn't have wanted to either. But for me, somehow the meaning is in that curbstone, because I'm trying to achieve something in there. And this is passive. This is not, unless you become a creator on there, you're just consuming.
Yeah.
And it's almost like capitalism gone mad in a way. Like, I don't think we're built to consume.
Not in that volume, for sure.
We're built to contribute.
Yeah, and that takes us further away, right?
It takes us further away from contribution, because 3 hours on a phone, have I contributed? Not really to anything. I've just consumed, and it's you know, I don't want to sound like that guy, because there's a lot of the great stuff that's being done. People will see about this on it. I've learned more about the world from being able to have access to social media, which has made me go, let's find that guy, let's find that guy, let's find that guy. There's a massive benefit to it.
Well, that's why it's complicated.
It comes at a cost.
Yeah, because it's mixed full of benefits and harms. I guess you have to weigh up, well, you know, which is playing a bigger role. I think, you know, if you know yourself well, you know when you're consuming too much.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. There should be perhaps lessons taught to all of us on how to use it.
Yeah.
Not whether it's good or bad. It's like, well, how? Because there is a skill on how to use
it's
social
that
media.
body thing. It's like, I know when I've wasted my time on it, because I put it down and I feel fatigued, and I feel like when I used to drink, and I'm like, I just feel like I've got a bit of a hangover.
Yeah, you're so right.
There was nothing good come from it. Whereas if I've spent, you know, an hour listening to a podcast, which was great,
very different.
I feel very different. I'm like, fantastic. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important for everyone to have something that they're crafting or getting better at. So like the skateboard analogy, right? It's like, that's really important. Unfortunately, social media doesn't allow that. You don't get better each day at something. You don't progress. In fact, it can be the other way. So you end up, like you say, waking up the next day or going to bed that night thinking, I haven't contributed today. I haven't been challenged.
And it doesn't be, and also, like, if you look at the things that particularly men seem to respect in each other, you know, competence plays a really good part, a really big part in what men respect in each other. I think men seem to respect kind of four things. They respect strength in each other, you know, not necessarily physical strength, but endurance. They respect that. You know, we respect strength. We respect courageousness in people. We respect competence, and we respect honour. We seem to look for those things in people. If you look at what someone who you consider to be a really good friend, for example, not just an acquaintance or someone who's just fun, but someone who's really an integral part of your life, I can pretty much look at all of them and go, competent, yep. Courageous, yep. Whether it be courageous by showing their vulnerability or by showing their strength.
Yep.
Honourable, yep. Strong.
Yeah.
In some way. That I tend to look for them, and I think that's a natural desire, because if you're backwards against the wall, what sort of man would you want next to you? You'd want someone, because there's no point in them being strong, courageous if you can't trust them. So we tend to look for those four things, I think, in each other. And my worry, and this is where I'm going to sound like the old man, oh, in my day, you know, it was all different, is where's the competence? Right? A few people will break through and stick to something and really learn and master something. But we're being taught to be surface on so many things, and the meaning comes from really going into something. You know, the carpenter, the meaning comes from the wood. It doesn't come from him. He didn't think, oh, do you know what, I want to be greatest carpenter in the world, that will really mean something to me. They started using the wood and thought, this wood's different to this wood, I have to do it like this with this wood. Suddenly there's the meaning in that. It's where I put my focus, I get the meaning from.
Yeah.
And intense focus gives me the most meaning. If it's just surface, I'm not really getting meaning, and I'm not building competence, because competence builds confidence. When you're really good at something, you're confident, because I can do that really well.
Yeah, well, that intense focus is something that's really difficult to do now. So a lot of people don't have the attention span for obvious reasons that we've just spoken about. So you never really reach that meaningful learning phase. You don't learn because you don't dive deep enough. So yeah, you might have come across something that grabs your interest, but you have to keep digging to get to the good shit.
Yeah.
You know, that's where the gold is. Like, you've got to keep going.
And the irony is, I think as a society, we're going to, and this is where, I don't know if you've read any of the Cal Newport stuff, Deep Work.
I've got Deep Work, and I've just finished the book that I was kind of referring to with the social media. It's called Digital Minimalism.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's a good
He's
book.
brilliant.
He is brilliant. And he's got a thing in there about, like, one of his theories, for those of you who haven't read it, is that as a society, because so much stuff is going to be able to done for us, especially as sort of AI and stuff comes along, that what's really going to be valuable will be intense pockets of knowledge.
Yeah.
Right, really specific things. And in a way, he says that's almost a return to the tradesman.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know much, but I know that, right? If it comes to carving marble, I'm your man. Right? And the only way you can do that is by intense practice and focus.
Yeah.
That's the only way. And everything that's being propagated around us is not building minds that are capable of intense focus. Right? Like, there's only one way to get good at something, and that is to give it hours and to give it your blood, metaphorically or physically. Right? You pay for it up front, and then you become really good at it. And as a society, I think we're going to start looking for that more and more. We've gone through a brief period where people could multitask, and that was great. But who needs to multitask now? You know, anyone can be a designer. Anyone can, you know, do a rough bit of graphic design. The person that's going to be valuable is the guy who really knows, the guy or woman who really knows the difference between how far that should go over by a millimeter.
And there's a great book called The Death of Expertise, I think it's called, and it's saying that, yeah, like everyone's an expert now, you know, like social media is allowed, and everyone has an opinion, and that can be that, you know, that sounds great, but when everyone's opinion is counted for and listened to, it's like, well, experts aren't needed now.
Yeah.
And there's a danger there. So we should be listening to those people, like you say, who've spent their life dedicated to a specific area. I could speak to you for hours, by the way. We're an hour and a half.
Is there any questions I didn't answer for you?
There's 2 traditional questions,
okay.
and there's loads of questions. Yeah, I could speak to you all day about this topic because I love it. And you're talking about, so even then, I'm getting excited. That thought of getting really good at something, that excites me.
And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be anything. That's
Just getting good. Yeah.
That's the beauty of social media.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you are really good at just one thing and fanatical about it,
yeah,
you know, it's like the whole Gary Vee thing.
Yeah.
You can make an industry out of that.
Yeah.
But you can't make an industry out of trying everything.
No, that's so true. And I'm trying to do that with my business. It's like, because I love variety, I love excitement. I love this, again, another reason of the podcast. I love speaking to different people. You know, every day is different in this studio, so there's a freshness in that. And I guess you could argue, well, it's the art of podcasting, so you know, keep doing the podcast. But I mean, I'm a huge Gary Vee fan. I think Gary Vee is awesome. But yeah, ultimately, sometimes you find out what you love by doing what you don't.
Yeah.
So you discover your true calling, we'll say, or whatever you want to get better at by ticking off a load of stuff that hasn't interested you as much as you think, and you often fine tune it down to that one thing. That's how my whole life's worked, man. It's like, oh, I don't want this, I don't want that, that isn't good for you, that isn't good for you, don't do this, and you start to create a better path that that you want to be on.
And then you find the bit, and you go,
and you find the goal,
and that brings us back to that second hero's journey, I think.
Yes.
Once you've got to that stage, then you can go, all right, that's gonna get all of me.
Yeah.
That's my purpose.
Yeah.
And that's going to get all of me. And then you build expertise.
Sure.
And then in an archetypal way, you move into your magician and your king space of being a mentor and a teacher to others, which is where we want to be when we're older, right? Like we want to be the elders.
Yeah, and I think some people stumble upon that when they're young, which is, I would consider it fortunate. I think, you know, they find out.
Yeah, lucky bastards.
I know, exactly, yeah. Whereas most guys, it's, 40s, 50s, and they're like, you know, they've removed a lot of the shit. And they're like, oh, this is what I want to do. And then it's a shame.
You know, some find it and it's a curse too. I always think of like footballers and rock stars, right?
Yeah.
Like you're young, you're good at something, and you love it, and you're highly rewarded. And for a young man, that's a dangerous space to be in. When you're getting the adoration, the money, and you're good at it, and everyone's listening to you because you're good at it, that's often a dangerous place to be.
Well, we see people crumble when they retire from these high sporting events.
And wreck it when they're in, destroy themselves when they're in.
Sure, yeah.
And that's where I think, just to finish off where we went to, it's where the elders are needed.
Yeah.
And that's where things like men's groups, and if we could all be in them, that's where we're great, because it's not just men together, they're also multi-generational. So there's often older men there to teach you something, and younger men there to remind you of something. And that's
true.
Really, really valuable.
Yeah, no, I've never thought of it like that, but I don't know why I've always been naturally inclined to sway towards wiser men. It's never been an issue for me to call someone and say, will you help me with this? What does concern me a little bit is, like, I think young men don't really look for that as much anymore, or maybe they don't know they need it, or that they don't know the benefits. But I ran a very successful kind of personal training business, and I know a lot of personal trainers, but never has one called me and said, Alex, you know, I'm just starting out in this game. Like, you did all right. Is there anything that you could help me with? I'd love that.
It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah, because I would reach out. You know, I would call you and say, Laurence, I hope you don't mind, but like, there's this thing that I'd like to learn or get better at. Would you help me? And you'd probably welcome it, because it'd be good for you, right? And it'd be good for me.
It's a very weird. It's a weird thing in the sort of men's personal development.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we teach, we try to teach, mostly whatever organisation you're in, is that we're better collaborative.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I've been doing this specifically for 20 years, and still you'll see younger guys starting out as men's coaches or whatever they are. And it's the same thing. Not one of them would reach. Very few. There's a couple that are wise enough to, but very few will reach out and go, "How can I do this? I'm putting this together. How could I bring this more into this workshop I'm doing?" And actually, like, it's not a Kentucky Fried Chicken secret sauce. I'd tell them.
Yeah, I know, but I think
it's everyone's benefit.
Sure, yeah. I think there's some distrust in men though from younger men. Like I think, like you say, depending on your upbringing, like men might not always be helpful. They might be harmful, or they might be a threat. Or I think there's a competition in people's heads. Like, you're in the same industry as me, you're competition. You know, you're a personal trainer, I'm a personal, right? You know, we're after the same thing and we can't collaborate. Yeah. And it's so far from the truth. But when I was young, I remember that when a new trainer would start the gym, I'd be like, who the fuck's this?
Well, so, I don't know.
Yeah, it's this guy. Like, come on, man. I've just started to get my client base and you're strolling. It was that kind of... and it was fear. It was insecurity. Yeah. Whereas now I don't see any of my fellow coaches, like, because we're on the same journey. So we're all just trying to get better. Yeah. So it's rather than me now preaching, it's more facilitating growth and encouraging learning and encouraging to put the phone down and encouraging to get good at something and learn and deepen whatever skill it is that you want. That for me is where my strength is. It's encouraging men to do that. It's not teaching them it. It's showing them the path on which I think they should be on to live a more fulfilled life, which is in learning. Indeed. What's next for you?
What is next for me?
Yeah.
I'm writing a book at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's good. So I'm trying to clarify the 4 C's at the moment, so it's something I can share because it's been really beneficial for me to do it that way.
Do you do like a small chunk each day, or do you go, right, I've got 6 hours there, I'm going to go balls deep in this?
I tend to do it I'll have periods of intense work, and then I baffle myself and walk away and then go, I remember now, and go back.
It's a tough gig writing.
But yeah, it's a tough gig. So I'm doing that. Continuing to my work within the Mankind Project to kind of really solidify what we call connection groups, which are the free online groups that we run, and try and bring kind of take the work we do. I'm the outreach director, so trying to take what we do and take it out to more men in the world rather than just bringing them onto the training.
Cool.
And that's really, really exciting at the moment.
Yeah.
And also working on getting my own podcast going.
Oh, fantastic.
The Masculinity X podcast.
Love it. So good luck with that.
Currently working on getting that going.
Yeah, I think you'll be great at it. You've got a lot to say, man. Final question. What are you working on now, or what do you need to work on in order to become a better man?
Good question. I think I had some really tough times. 2010, I lost an art gallery and publishing business, and it was near bankruptcy, the whole lot. And then I lost a son also, and I think what that done was I went small in some way. I think from that, I became a lot more insular than I used to be, and a bit more risk averse, really, especially because the loss of the business that was quite public, and I let a lot of people down and hurt a lot of people doing that, as you tend to when something goes out of business. There was money in relationships that went and were broken. So I think what I've got to work on, and what I am working on, is my willingness to be visible back, putting my head above the parapet a bit more, which is where the podcast and stuff is coming in. I've started playing it safe.
Okay.
So that would be what I need to work on.
Which is a shame for a man like yourself who can help others.
Yeah.
I get it, by the way.
Yeah.
I get it. It's a battle I have. I want to go quiet too. I don't want to post on social media.
Yeah, I mean it's tough, but I've come to the stage where that's that's my mission in the world, is to go out and help people. So I've got to
Yeah.
be more visible.
Definitely. And I don't know whether this is any consolation or not, but I'd love to hear more from you and learn from you.
Thank you.
So by putting that out, I'd say you were doing a service to people who want to learn and grow. Those who don't will check out.
Yeah.
That's cool, right? But for someone who's been through what you've been through and the amount of courses that you've run with the Mankind Project, especially, yeah, like there's stuff that you can teach me for sure. Like that could change my life, you know, impact my relationships on a positive level, make me a better person, and everything that we've talked about in this podcast, you know, just making the most out of life.
Yeah.
Like there's not many people out there that could guide and direct men. So if you have those skills, you got to fucking get out there and do it, man.
That's the plan.
Yeah, well, I look forward to it. It's been a pleasure. I'd love to speak more. Like I said, there's so much that I could speak to you about because it's a complex topic and it's one where we go in multiple directions. But I appreciate you coming up from London, man. It's been awesome to meet you as well. Very well behaved. Are you always this well behaved?
No.
Hold on. Are you always this well behaved? Yes, that's the right answer.
He's a good boy.
Cool, mate. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's great.
It's cool, isn't
Love
it?
this space. Really good.
It's awesome. Cool. Right, thank you, my man. That was
Cheers.
awesome. Dude, thank you.